Today I'm going to comment something about artificial intelligence applications in medicine and health, and in particular in computational psychiatry, because this is my field. I just come across one interesting article connected to IEEE, and Andrew Ng, who is famous AI scientist, I should actually call him a star of the whole field because he was co-founder of Google Brain in 2011 and chief scientist in Baidu, and he is also famous lecturer engaged in Harvard. Andrew Ng was one of the first scientists who pointed to the problem of unwarranted optimism, meaning that the model you're developing on a small sample looks very promising, but once you put it in practice, it turns out to be not so great. Actually, he explained that the smaller the sample set, the higher accuracy you get on whatever model you're trying to do. Basically, he was one of the prominent scientists who started shining with his early work of neural networks on 1997 and from 2000 onwards. But it is very curious that the last piece published by IEEE is showing that Andrew Ng actually is changing his mind on the big data. So the thing is that I tried to mention here earlier that all that hype about AI or artificial intelligence, machine learning projects, big data, and so on, when we actually compare the effectivity of those applications and algorithms, it is actually not so great. And I already spoke about that in a specific video about the reality check in AI in health. What is actually going on? When we say big data, it actually led to collecting all kinds of data about individual and trying to data mine and try to predict something which is useful in healthcare, in medicine. But since many developers actually don't have so much contact with medicine and clinical reality, everyday life in clinics, they actually made a kind of logical error, I think, because web-collected big data usually don't have to do anything with carefully crafted clinical data, which are not that accessible and protected by GDPR. So Andrew Ng, who was surely in position to test everything that a mortal can, because he was involved in the most financed and most famous project about big data and AI, actually changed his mind, because he said that in many industries where giant data sets simply don't exist, I think the focus has to shift from big data to good data. Oh, welcome. I'm talking about that so long. Having 50 thoughtfully engineered examples can be sufficient to explain to the neural network what you want it to learn, Andrew Ng, CEO and founder of Landing AI. To just compare with our findings, we tried to detect depression in people who are already in treatment based on electroencephalogram, because we know physiological background and context, and we know why the characteristic aberration exists in electrical signals their bodies are producing. Also later we focused on extracting similar data from other electrophysiological signals, but the point here is, as well as a blind spot in a thinking of engineer who is modeling the algorithms to actually use big data to give some forecasting, which is useful clinically. Also, people who are doing in clinical practice have their own blind spot, because when you really look closely how the current business is working in clinical psychiatry, you see that the main clinical decisions are made on pretty objective data, meaning involving self-report or report from the patient, but people also lie, and also based on impression and experience of the examiner, which is psychotherapist, which must be biased or have some noise in it, because we are all human. So my point here is that some combination with novel instructions by such a big star like Andrew Ng, and our knowledge that we have from our previous projects is that we should really focus on small but really nicely crafted data, which is leading us to focus on electrophysiology. Since we already know that first choice therapy, namely antidepressants or psychotherapy or a combination of both, is actually not working, have a very, very modest effect size, we should turn to something else to make better clinical decisions. So I invite you to learn more about AI applications in health and especially in computational psychiatry, and I will update you on more papers and more results which are making easier for us to understand what real options we have in applying AI in psychiatry. Thank you for listening.